67, 3 verses. Yes, you're right. Sorry. I was about to start counting on my fingers. 65. It's 3, yeah, you're right. The last 3 verses of this chapter. I'm just pulling it up here now. Which one's on the board? Okay, so they put 65 on the board. So we'll recite 65, then I'll chant 66 and 67 by myself. Divyambara Shanmanibihi Paradhyerapi Bhushanai Divyagandhanulepaischa Matyutpalamalaya Divyambara Shanmanibihi Paradhyerapi Bhushanai Divyagandhanulepaischa Matyutpalamalaya. Vaishnavas. Divyambara Shanmanibihi Paradhyerapi Bhushanai Divyagandhanulepaischa Mahatyutpalamalaya. Divyambara Shanmanibihi Paradhyerapi Bhushanai Divyagandhanulepaischa Mahatyutpalamalaya. Divyambara Shanmanibihi Paradhyerapi Bhushanai Divyagandhanulepaischa Mahatyutpalamalaya. You may as well. Divyambara Shanmanibihi Paradhyerapi Bhushanai Divyagandhanulepaischa Mahatyutpalamalaya. Divya, divine. Ambara, with clothing. Shrak, garlands. Manibihi, and jewels. Para ardhyaye, most valuable. Api, also. Bhushanai, ornaments. Divya, divine. Gandha, with scents. Anulepai, and ointments. Cha, as well. Mahatya, fine. Utpala, of lotuses. Malaya, with the garland. The translation is longer than the word to word, obviously, because it's 3 verses in one. So I'll read the translation by the servants of His Divine Grace. Ki Jai. Kaliya worshipped the Lord of the universe by offering him fine garments, along with necklaces, jewels, and other valuable ornaments, wonderful scents and ointments, and a large garland of lotus flowers. So this is a description of all the beautiful things that Kaliya used to worship the Lord. And we can see the attention to detail, not just any kind of scents, but wonderful scents, and large garlands, not like a tiny little thing where the flowers are speckled. Valuable ornaments. So it's nice. Like the Bhagavatam's pointing out that you offer something to the Lord, you want to pay attention to the material quality of the ingredient also. That's why it says fine garments and large garlands. Having thus pleased the Lord, whose flag is marked with the emblem of Garuda, Kaliya felt satisfied. This is the key point of this whole verse and purport, is this point here about how Kaliya felt satisfied after worshiping the Lord. And we'll see why. Receiving the Lord's permission to leave, Kaliya circumambulated him and offered him obeisances. Then, taking his wives, children, and friends, he went to his island in the sea, the Ramanaka island. The very moment Kaliya left, the Yamuna was immediately restored to her original condition, free from poison and full of nectarian water. This happened by the mercy of the Supreme Lord, who was manifesting a human-like form to enjoy his pastimes. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has commented extensively on this verse. To explain the word mani bihi, quote, Kaliya worshipped the Lord with jewels, the Acharya has quoted from the Sri Radhakrishna Ganodesh Deepika by Rupa Goswami, where it says, quote, the Lord has made his Kaustuba gem enter the serpent's lake, and then he arranged for it to be presented to himself by the hands of Kaliya's wives. So it's his own gem that fell off while he was dancing. And then it fell into the treasure chest of Kaliya, and then it was given back to him by Kaliya's wives, who were thinking, oh, this is just part of Kaliya's treasury. This is what Rupa Goswami is pointing out. In other words, because Lord Krishna wanted to act just like an ordinary human being, he made the transcendental Kaustuba gem invisible and caused it to enter within Kaliya's treasury. Then, when the appropriate moment came for Kaliya to worship the Lord with many different jewels and ornaments, the serpent's wives, unaware of the Lord's transcendental trick, presented him with the same Kaustuba gem, thinking it was simply one of the jewels in their possessions. So it's the Lord's own Kaustuba gem that's just coming back to him, and Krishna is experiencing the pastime of being the receiver of gifts, and he's enjoying it. The Acharya has further commented that the reason Lord Krishna is described in this verse as Garuda Twaja, he whose flag is marked by the symbol of his carrier Garuda, is that Kaliya also desired to become Lord Krishna's carrier. Garuda and the serpents are originally related as brothers, and therefore Kaliya wanted to indicate to Lord Krishna, quote, if you ever have to go to a distant place, you should also think of me as your personal carrier. I am the servant of your servant, and in the wink of an eye I can travel hundreds of millions of yojanas. Thus the Puranas narrate that in the course of Lord Krishna's eternal cycle of pastimes, when Kamsa orders the Lord to come to Mathura, he sometimes goes there mounted upon Kaliya. What is the other way that he goes to Mathura? Adam? Can't hear you. Still can't hear you. No, what is the other way in which he goes to Mathura usually? With whom? Come on, you just read this. Who takes him to Mathura? You just read this. Akrura. There you go. Okay. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yudapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauradvishe Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Manchakalpatarivascha Kripasindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Srimad Bhagavatam class. So, in this verse, what we're seeing is the culmination of the Kaliya pastime. And Kaliya is now worshipping the Lord with choice ingredients like fine garlands and jewels, and feeling very satisfied as a result of that. And then taking off, leaving Vrindavan and going to the island where he came from with the Lord's protection, because now his hoods are marked with the feet of the Lord. In other words, Garuda will not attack him. Nobody can attack him, because if they come to attack him, they'll see the footmarks of the Lord and they will refrain, right? Oh, okay, I thought Jennifer was about to say something to me. So the basic idea is this, when he's been marked now, he's been marked with Krishna's protection, so nobody's going to harm him. And the Acharyas point out that the gem that the wives of Kaliya offered to Krishna, was actually one of Krishna's own gems that Srila Jiva Goswami points out had fallen off of him when he was dancing on top of Kaliya and fallen into the lake and into the treasure chest of Kaliya. And that was then offered back to Krishna from Kaliya's wives. And in this way, Krishna enacts this pastime of being the receiver of the material offerings of his devotees. And this is really the main point of the class today, is that Krishna will create a sense of necessity, will create a sense of relationship, so that in that relationship, his devotees feel compelled to offer him something, right? To offer him their love. And love is expressed through service, it's expressed through objects like Adam brought me some really nice ginger honey from Wisconsin. This is how we express affection, right? Gift giving is an important part of receiving and giving affection, isn't it? So I was just thinking about how there's some philosophical points I wanted to share. Maybe I'll do that first before I go into more like pastimes. But I was thinking about different pastimes that have always inspired me, in which Krishna um, he facilitates an exchange of or receiving of worship or gifts from his devotees in order to actually give them his love and blessings. Even though he's Atmarama, he's fully self-sufficient. It's like having an uncle who's a multi-billionaire. What do you buy him for his birthday? He's got everything he needs. He doesn't have your love. So you can always offer him that. But before we get into that, I thought to use the Bhagavad Gita as a starting off point to explain how the main principle in spiritual life is one of sacrifice, is one of giving, because it's sacrifice that creates a spirit of selflessness. And we as conditioned souls, we suffer from timeless egocentrism, which means that from the beginning of our existence as conditioned souls, of course, it's eternal. Our beginning is eternal, it's anadi. So it's not like we can say there was a beginning of our existence. We've always existed, but just, for the sake of language, it's hard to find a better word. But we've always been conditioned in this material world, and conditioned basically means all we think about is ourselves, whatever our preoccupation is, whatever our ego, whatever ourselves gets absorbed into, right? So it's very hard for us to not be selfish. It's just part of the package. So what Krishna is presenting in the Gita is a very sophisticated science for how we move from a state of being very self-centered to a state of being very Krishna-centered, to a state of being very love-centered. And there's different stages in the Gita of, you could say, decreasing selflessness that are being pointed out. So I picked a few verses and then comments from Prabhupada's purports that help us see how these ideas are there in the Gita, and that by beginning this act of giving or sacrifice, we're slowly progressing in the direction of full selflessness, full love. So the first two verses I want to point out are from the 9th chapter of the Gita, where Krishna tells Arjuna, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, and whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. Welcome, Subal Prabhu Krishna Archana Mataji. Hare Krishna. Do that as an offering unto me. And then he follows it up by saying that if you do that, what happens if everything you do it as an offering? What happens? In this way, you will be freed from bondage to work and its auspicious and inauspicious results. Which means, like the piety and impiety. So you do something good, you're not going to get a pious result for it. Because to enjoy the pious result, you have to take birth in the material world again. Right? Or an impious result, because for that, again, you have to take birth in the material world and suffer. So when you work in this consciousness, your work doesn't accrue a pious or impious result. With your mind fixed on me in this principle of renunciation, you will be liberated and you will come to me. So now, what is Krishna pointing out here? What Krishna is pointing out is that, okay, let us begin selflessness by first controlling your external environment. Because the verse prior to this, Krishna says, just offer me a leaf, fruit, flower, water. I'll accept anything. Offer me anything. At least just begin. Begin from somewhere. Prabhupada used to say, what is so difficult about offering a leaf or flower or fruit? Anybody can do it, right? Adam likes to pluck flowers. He can just walk around the neighborhood, pluck some wild flowers, put it on the altar. It didn't cost you any money. It just cost you about 5 or 10 minutes at a time, a little bit of, a sense of attention. Okay, which colors go together? And you offer to the Lord. And who benefits? Krishna doesn't need these wildflowers. He's got wish-fulfilling trees in Vrindavan. He's got the most fragrant flowers in all of existence waiting for him in Vrindavan. But who benefits by that simple act? Who benefits, Alex? Yeah, you do, exactly. Like Kaliya felt satisfied. You'll feel satisfied. I took my time and energy and offer something to the Lord. Now imagine if, You have 24 hours in a day, of which 8 hours are spent sleeping, right? Maybe another 8 hours spent working, another 4 or 5 hours spent eating, another 2 or 3 hours doing other things. So you take out like maybe 5 minutes in your day just to offer something to Krishna. And Krishna, that's how easy Krishna is making it for conditioned souls. Just start somewhere. Just give me a little something. And it's for your benefit. But that 5 minutes of little bit of offering to Krishna has begun the deconstruction of our false ego. The deconstruction of our false ego, where we think I'm the controller, I'm the enjoyer, I'm the possessor of everything I have. I've started my journey of selflessness just by that little bit of offering something external to Krishna. So what does Srila Prabhupada write in the purport? He says, actually situated in renunciation, such activities clear the mirror of the mind. Right? So these activities of offering things to Krishna are situated in renunciation because it is the act of sacrifice. These activities are born from this idea of sacrifice, of offering something to the Lord. And what do? They clear the mirror of the mind. And as the actor gradually makes progress in spiritual realization, he becomes completely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada is pointing out here that the beginning of, sacrifice begins with this, something external, and through that, the mirror of one's mind is clear, and one gradually progresses towards complete surrender to the Supreme Lord. This isn't the stage of complete surrender. This is Karma Mishra Bhakti. But he's moving in that direction. The Acharya Prabhupada's pointing out in his purport. So then what's the next stage? What happens once the mind is becoming more clear? Now you've offered your body. Now it's time to offer something else. It's time to offer your mind also. And for that, Krishna says in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he says, persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life. So what does that mean? It means that you began these acts of sacrifice in a past life, and you continue in this life, and because of your continual acts of sacrifice, offering devotional offerings to the Lord, the mind has become very purified. The mind has become cleansed, right? Whose sinful actions are completely eradicated and who are freed from the duality of delusion, engage themselves in my service with determination. So determination is a mental quality, and it's a mental quality born of repeated acts of sacrifice. Does that make sense? Makes sense, right? Your mind is becoming purified because life after life, you're performing acts of sacrifice. So then what does Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport? He says, only those who have passed their lives in practicing the regulated principles of religion, who have acted piously and have conquered sinful reactions, can accept devotional service and gradually rise to the pure knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Key point here, they've acted piously, so they've accumulated a lot of piety, sukriti, bhakti sukriti, as a result of which have overcome their sinful reactions. They're able to now accept devotional service, and they gradually rise to the platform of pure knowledge, the platform of pure awareness of one's eternal relationship with Krishna. And this is the last line of Prabhupada's comment. He writes, then gradually they can meditate in trance on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the process of being situated on the spiritual platform. Very deep, actually, this comment. It's a very, very deep comment because the root of our existence in the material world is avidya, ignorance. And ignorance doesn't just mean that we don't know something, it also means that we mistake something for what it isn't. What does that mean? If you go to a tribal person in Indonesia, you show him this, right? And you ask him, what is this, my dear sir? He doesn't know what it is. That's ignorance. But if he thinks, oh, maybe this is a device for me to use to like crack, nuts, and he starts using it to crack, that's also ignorance. He's misusing the object, right? So avidya has two faces. The first face of avidya is you don't know what it is. The second face of avidya is you think it's something else. So for us, we don't know that we're spirit souls. And then we make the mistake of thinking we're our bodies. And then we act at a very subconscious level. All our decisions, all our thoughts, all our emotions are informed by that ignorance, that we think we are this temporary body. I am a man, I am like this, I come from India, therefore the Pakistanis are bad. These very like subtle kind of ego-driven misconceptions, right? So what happens as a result of performing, sacrifice life after life is that the mind becomes purified. And then Prabhupada is writing here, then gradually one can meditate on trance, on the Supreme Personality of God. This is very important to understand these principles because how many of us feel our japa could improve? Anybody here? Jaibal is the only one whose japa doesn't need improvement. That's great. But my japa definitely needs a lot of improvement. You know what I'm saying? So I want to be able to meditate on trance, on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada's giving us a clue here. Continue performing pious activities. Purify the mirror of your mind. And then accept devotional service with determination. Then you can meditate on the Supreme Lord. This is the process, Because what happens as a result of that is that the avidya goes away, and at a very deep level, you start to realize, I'm a servant of God. I'm an eternal spirit soul. So then comes the final stage. As our self-identification becomes very, you could say, fixed, then Krishna tells Arjuna, my dear Arjuna, he who engages in my pure devotional service, and now Krishna's talking about pure devotional service. He's done talking about piety and impiety, sacrifice, just accepting with determination. We've moved past those stages now. We're no longer at those stages. One who engages in my pure devotional service, which means what? Which means devotional service for no other motivation, not to become advanced, not to like have a peaceful mind, not to just feel happy in this material world, right? Not, for none of those reasons, but just for the sake of doing devotional service. Because that's what we do. We just serve God. That's it. That's pure devotional service for His pleasure. No other motivation. Free from the contaminations of fruitive activities and mental speculation. He who works for me, who makes me the supreme goal of his life, and who is friendly to every living being, he certainly comes to me. Now listen to what Prabhupada writes in the purport. It's so cool. He says, anyone who wants to approach the supreme of all the personalities of Godhead on the Krishna Loka planet in the spiritual sky and be intimately connected with the Supreme Personality must take this formula as stated by the Supreme Himself. Therefore, this verse is considered to be the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, this verse is considered to be the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. Why? Because it's presenting the stage of pure devotional service, at which the point at which the mind is purified, we have accepted with determination, we have knowledge of who we are, and now we want the goal of life, right? So we engage in pure devotional service, free from all these contaminations, and key point, we've made Krishna the goal of our life, and He's friendly to every living being. Very important, it's sometimes people accuse us of being too God-centered, and they always ask, well, what about everybody else? What about all the suffering people in Somalia, and like, what about the hungry children in some other in Sudan? What about all these other suffering living entities? Well, I say we don't have to look that far. Can we be friendly to the people that are in our immediate circle, please? I don't have to worry about giving charity to starving children in Sudan, but I'm like a jerk to every devotee in my circle, or like I'm mean to everyone around me. Charity begins at home. Charity begins right here. Yashodanandan recently, and this is the first and last time I'll quote something not from the scriptures in a Bhagavatam class, hopefully. He quoted some management expert. Josh is cringing, but it's a nice quote. He said, what did he say? He said, before you conquer the world, conquer your area code. In other words, before you think big about having some impact in the world and changing the world, have you made an impact in the immediate area around you? You know what I'm saying? Have you had a positive effect in the relationships in your most intimate circle? You know what I'm saying? This is a very beautiful point, because for many people, many times, very successful people, many times have very terrible relationships with their own wives, their own kids, and their own families. They sometimes even like spiritual leaders, they might be able to preach to many people, but when it comes to their intimate circle, when it comes to people that are close to them, the relationships are really weak. This can happen to anyone in any walk of life. So what Krishna is saying here, make me the goal of your life, act in pure devotional service, and be friendly to every living being. Don't disregard other living entities, because, I'm also in their hearts. I'm also in their hearts. So this verse, Prabhupada says, is considered to be the essence of the Gita, and it's presenting the culmination of the life of sacrifice that began perhaps many lifetimes ago, where we started by offering something to Krishna, maybe in a very external way. Maybe just coming once a week to the temple and offering a coconut, or an orange. Something like that. And the rest of the time, we're just absorbed in our own ego-driven, selfish lifestyle choices, But that little simple act of once a week coming, offering a coconut, maybe then it became twice a week, thrice a week. Then sometimes you're just sitting, and without even trying, you're able to think of Krishna and His lotus feet. You're able to think of the Lord. And that means now your mind is slowly surrendering. Your mind is slowly surrendering to the idea that there is a God, and He's my master and I'm His servant. And that, as you continue acting with that consciousness, we continue to grow, and then the culmination is this. We make Krishna the goal of our life. And then the final point that the purport was bringing out was that Krishna, he he wants to play. He wants to play, and therefore he enacts these passages. What was the exact phrase from the purport? Let me find the exact phrase in the purport so I don't speculate. Because the word play is actually used by Srila Jiva Goswami, not in this purport. So it says here, right. Actually, I'll just read Srila Jiva Goswami's comment because that's where I got the idea of play from. So here's what Srila Jiva Goswami says in regards to this particular verse. He says, not only did that place become free of poison, the water became nectar with the sweetest nectar. Right? So the poison was gone, and then the water became really sweet. Or by contact with the Lord's lotus feet, that water was able to give the highest bliss. Such ability is nothing for the Lord, since he is Bhagavan. Bhagavan literally means one who is... Actually, Josh, since you're studying Sanskrit, what is the etymological meaning of the word Bhagavan? Means? Fortune. Uh-huh. One who is full of all the best qualities. One who is full of... So for someone who is full of all the best qualities, for him to turn the waters of the Yamuna into something very sweet is not so extraordinary. It's completely normal. That's what Srila Jiva Goswami is saying. Then he writes something. He says, his goal is play. I'll repeat that again. His goal is play. He has a form as a human being engaged in play. And in Sanskrit it says Krida Manusha Rupina. So Krida means to play, Manusha means human, Rupina means form. So the human form designed for play. The Yamuna acted suitably for his human pastimes. So there was this famous story of the disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, the German, who came to India, and he reported to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta that Krishna has to be the Supreme Lord. So anybody, I'm sure the seniors know this story, but Adam, have you heard of this story? Have you heard this story before about the German who came to India and he visited different Hindu temples and he decided Krishna must be the supreme? Have you heard this story? Okay, so then you like it. So he reported to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta that, I think Krishna must be the supreme personality of Godhead. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, how did you conclude that? He said, because I went to so many different temples and all the different deities are doing something. Kali is like killing demons. Ganesh is like eating ladus. Why is he eating ladus? Because actually he's the scribe of Valmiki. So he told Valmiki, I'll keep writing as long as you keep feeding me ladus. If you stop, I'll stop writing. So there was an unlimited supply of ladus next to him as he wrote. That's why Ganesh is always eating a ladu. When you go to a Ganesh temple, he's always eating a ladu. Garuda is always going places. So whatever form of divinity that this German saw was always engaged in doing some work. Vishnu is creating and destroying and maintaining, So, but when he saw Krishna, he's just standing there playing his flute. So he's like, this must be God. Because what's the use of being God if you still have to work? This must be God. So God just gets to play because he's in charge, so he can play. So I began my class by sharing how Krishna facilitates relationships and experiences and moments where his devotees will offer him things. And there's a few stories I would like to share in this regard that have always inspired me. Most of you already probably know these stories, so I won't stretch them out too much. But one of my favorite stories is about Srila Sanatana Goswami, who was living in Vrindavan, and he had come upon a pair of beautiful deities, Radha Madan Mohan. And every day Srila Sanatana Goswami, because he was the emblem, he was so renounced, he was taking some dough balls, rolling them into a ball, and throwing them in a fire. And that's what he was offering to the deities. And he was eating that. That was his sustenance because they were renunciates. They lived very simply. And actually in Vrindavan, I went on Govardhan Parikrama one time, and I saw this lady, this homeless lady. There's a part of the Govardhan Parikrama where there's all these homeless people that sit by the side of the road, and they're beggars, and they're waiting for pilgrims to give them some money. So this woman had just finished cooking, and I saw that she had a fire built, and from inside the fire, she was pulling out little balls of dough that she had thrown in there to cook, and she was throwing them on a plate, like ashen and black, and little balls of dough that she had cooked in the fire. And in Rajasthan, where I grew up, this is a popular dish actually, like dough balls cooked in fire, but then you add a lot of ghee and vegetables and stuff. It's not just, you don't just eat it so plain. But Sanatana Goswami was just eating it plain. So Krishna came to him in a dream and said, like, you're just offering me dough balls. Can you at least, can you at least offer a little salt? And Sanatana Goswami's response was, today you ask for salt, tomorrow you'll ask for ghee, then you'll ask for butter, sugar, and then milk. Like, what do you expect? I'm a renunciate. I can't get these things for you. Can you just be quiet and eat what I offer you? So imagine being able to have that kind of conversation with God. But how comfortable must Krishna feel with you? How much love must he have for you to just manifest in your heart and start asking you for service? You know, there's many stories like this. There is a story about the very famous temple in Vrindavan, temple of Gornitai, and it was managed by this lady. Her name was Pishima, and she was a princess actually from Bengal, and somehow she came under the influence of devotees from Vrindavan. I believe Krishna Das Babaji. I can't remember all the details. It's in my O.B.L. Kapoor book, Saints of Braj. It's in that book actually. I haven't read that story in like 3 or 4 years. But basically, the way the story goes is that she had these Gornitai deities that she had a very motherly relationship with. She would feed them sweet milk, and they would come in her dreams and ask her for things, give us sweet rice, give us this, give us that, get us new clothes. And everybody knew she had this very motherly and affectionate relationship with the deities. And at one point, she became way too old for the service, way too old. So a young pujari came from Bengal, and he started taking care of the deities. And one morning, she came down for the darshan, and she called the pujari over, and she told the pujari, "Did you bathe Gornitai with cold water?" And the pujari was like, "Yeah, because it was really early in the morning, and I couldn't start a fire, so I just used cold water to bathe the deities." And she was like, "They have a cold now." And this pujari was like, "What do you mean they have a cold?" So she said, "Look," she took her sari and she put it underneath Nithai's nose, right? And then she showed it to him. There was phlegm on the sari. There was phlegm on the sari. So in this way, like, she had such a personal relationship with the deities that they would get sick and she would know it, and then they would actually give symptoms of being sick. This temple is still there actually. It's in Loy Bazaar. Very beautiful deities of Gornitai. Another famous story where this is a story coming from the Gaudiya Math. It's about a very famous disciple of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. His name was Josh. Help me out. The really Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj. That's right. He lived to the age of 102, and at the age of 100, he still knew over 100,000 verses by heart. Naishtik Brahmachari joined the Math when he was like 14 or 15. Very pure soul, very, very pure soul, and very humble devotee. And yeah, I mean, he was alive up until less than 20 years ago, which is quite remarkable. A disciple of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta still on the earth less than 20 years ago. Like, that's pretty cool. Anyway, so when he was a young brahmachari in the Math in Navadvip, one morning he put the deities to sleep, and he went off to sleep himself, and then Krishna came to him in a dream and said, "Look at you, sleeping so nicely with a warm blanket while I'm here shivering in the cold." So then he immediately got up, took a bath, put on fresh cloth, opened the altar, went on the altar, and then wrapped a chadar around the deities, because it was winter, and he had actually forgotten to wrap a chadar around the deities. And then Krishna came in a dream and said, come and offer me some service, Like that, there's so many stories in our tradition of devotees who become advanced enough where Krishna feels enough love is there in their hearts where he can just appear and demand service. We see this throughout the Bhagavatam. He's always demanding service from Mother Yashoda. Feed me, I'm hungry. When he goes into the houses of the gopis, he's sometimes urinating on their floors and breaking their butter pots. And it looks like he's being mischievous, but actually the gopis love it. They enjoy it. They enjoy the fact that Krishna came and made a mess. Now they have something to do for Krishna. They have a chance to reciprocate by offering him service. And of course, one of my favorite pastimes in this regard is the pastime of Sudama Brahman. And we all know the story pretty well, so I won't go into too much details. But Sudama Brahman, there's a few elements of the story that are just really, really sweet. So we all know that he was a poor Brahmin who lived. Him and his wife shared one piece of cloth. They were that poor that when it was time to go begging, she would take that cloth and go out and beg. When he would have to go outside, he would use that cloth and go out. They just had one cloth between the two of them. That's how poor they were. And at one point, the wife finally told him, look, you grew up with Krishna. He's the king of Dwarka. And he's like your buddy from, boarding school. Because they went to Sandipani Muni's ashram together. Why don't you go to him and ask him for something? And he's like, no, come on. It's very embarrassing, actually. That's why one of the most challenging services in a temple. What do you think is the most challenging service in a temple? What do you think it is? Being a manager is definitely very challenging, but there's a service that's almost just as challenging. What do you think it is? Fundraising. Yeah, asking for something that you need. You got it. That's a pretty difficult position to be in, to be a fundraiser. Unless, anyway, certain races of people do really well with that. Certain others don't. Anyways, that's a joke. But no, but really, it's difficult to be a fundraiser, right? To go to people and say, can you give money? Can you help us buy this? Can you help us buy that? But it's invaluable. If we didn't have fundraising happening in the temple, how would we pay for the bills? How would these lights keep going? How would we have prasadam every single day? Because someone goes out and asks, can you please give? Can you please give for the deities? And people give. And that's how it happens. So Sudama was embarrassed. He's like, I don't want to go fundraise. He's my friend. It's especially more humiliating if you have to ask a friend. Friends are friends. You just go and hang out with them. You don't go and ask your friend for money. You know what I'm saying? It's very embarrassing. So I was like, I can't do this. He's a friend, And his wife was like, no, you have to. And sometimes wives can be a little pushy, right? I'm kidding, not Mother Krishna Archana. But some wives can be a little pushy. So she finally got him out of the house, and he went. But before he went, he said, I must take something. I can't just show up empty-handed. So what do we have? She's like, we have nothing. Like literally, we have nothing. We have the one piece of cloth that you're taking, and there's nothing else in the house. So she went and begged. She went and begged some chipped rice from the neighbors that he could take with him as an offering. And Chaitanya Prabhu was explaining so nicely in a class that when you give a beggar something, you don't give them the best of what you have, you give them the worst of what you have. Right? Like when homeless people stop by the car on Sankirtan and they ask for money, we don't give them a $20 bill. We give them a quarter or 50 cents. Right? So we start at the bottom, not at the top. So in the same way, when the wife of Sudama went to beg for chipped rice, they didn't give her the highest quality basmati rice that was aged. They gave her the worst chipped rice. In fact, the chipped rice that the rats had eaten out of, that they couldn't use for cooking anymore. That's how low quality it was. Just like if you go into the storeroom downstairs in our boga room and we see that a mouse has bitten away at a bag of rice, then Ram Prakash isn't going to want to use it. He's like, I don't, that's muchi now. It's been touched by the lips of a rat. That's disgusting. We can't use that, so we'll throw it out. That chipped rice that had been eaten by a rat was given to Sudama's wife. And that's what Sudama Brahman took with him to Mathura, to Dwarka, to meet with Krishna. And we know he arrived in Dwarkapuri, and he was greeted by the guards, and he told them that I'm a friend of Krishna's. They took him inside, and we all know what happened. Krishna came and offered him abhishek, like washed his lotus feet, and then drank it and threw it over him and his wife, and welcomed him very lovingly, sat him down, and then they had many nice exchanges. They were discussing stories from their childhood. Do you remember, just like when you meet an old friend, like Adam has so many friends, he's Mr. Popular. So when you meet your friends from high school, they're going to be like, Adam, you remember when you watched that Japanese anime for 3 weeks straight without eating anything? And then you're like, yeah, I remember those days. Those were the good days, Like that, Krishna and Sam were discussing. Remember when we were at Sandipani Muni's ashram, one time we had to get firewood, and we had to do this, and we had to do that. We had so much fun. We learned so many things. They were just connecting. And Sudama was very much loving and appreciating Krishna's association. And he didn't ask for anything, he didn't ask for anything. At one point, Krishna noticed, you have something under your arm. Like this, he had this bag under his arm. Now what happens when you keep something under your arm and you walk for a long distance? What happens? You sweat on it. So he'd had it there the whole time. So Krishna was like, what's that under your arm? And Sudama was like, it's embarrassing, you're sitting in the palace of the king of Dwarka. He's like, nothing. So Krishna's like, no, let me see. What's that? Sudama was like, no, it's nothing. Don't worry about it. It's nothing. Krishna's like, you're hiding something from me. What is it? And Sudama was like, nothing. And then Krishna snatches it out of his hand. Because what he's really snatching is Sudama's love. He's not snatching chipped rice. He doesn't need chipped rice. And then Krishna looks inside. It's like, what? Chipped rice? You got this from me? Sudama was like, he's speechless. How can he say that I got you chipped rice? So what does Krishna do? He takes a scoop of Sweat-soaked chipped rice eaten by rats. Would you offer that to the deities? If we were cooking Raj Bhog and you saw some rice that was mingled in with rat feces, would you take it, wash it, and cook it for the deities? Not in your wildest dreams. Krishna takes a bite. You know what he says? Delicious. Goes for a second bite. Delicious. Goes in for a third. Rukmini's like, stop. You won't be able to reciprocate. Now think about that for a moment. This is bhakti. Rukmini is saying you won't be able to reciprocate. Why did she stop Krishna? What is so difficult for the Lord of the universe to reciprocate with in a bag of chipped rice? It's chipped rice. It's worth nothing. Why did Rukmini say you won't be able to reciprocate? Why? What did she mean? I'm open to a suggestion. I'm open to a thought. Right. Because Rukmini knew that. See, because think about it like this, right? So Krishna says, Ye yathama prapadyante, I reciprocate in accordance with what my devotees offer, right? Just like, you offer me something, then when I want to give you a present, I will offer something more or less at the same level, right? That's how the world works, right? It's not like you offer me an orange and I buy you a house. That's not how the world works. It's very unreasonable, actually. You don't reciprocate like that. So Krishna says, I respond according to what my devotee offers. Now, what did Sudama Brahman do? He had nothing. He begged. He offered Krishna something he didn't even have. He had to go begging for it, right? Can Krishna reciprocate in kind? Can he reciprocate with that? He already owns everything. How is he supposed to go beg? You follow? Krishna can't just artificially make himself poor to go and now beg and put himself in the same position as Sudama and have such a humble offering. He can't. He's the Lord of the universe. He owns everything in existence. There is no way for him to reciprocate with what Sudama Brahman gave him. That level of humility, that level of poverty from which Sudama Brahman came, and in that position, his wife begged some chipped rice, and he brought that sweat-soaked with love in his heart to give to Krishna. Krishna has no way of reciprocating with that. That's why Rukmini said, stop, you won't be able to reciprocate. And, when Sudama Brahman goes back to Avanti, was it Avanti? I don't remember. Maybe it was Avanti. I don't remember where he was from. When he goes back home, of course, his hut had become a palace. His poor wife, who was dressed in nothing, like barely with rags, was now dressed like a princess, covered with jewels. So very beautiful. Krishna did, even though Sudama didn't ask, Krishna did whatever he could to reciprocate with his devotee. So the point is that why is this important for us to understand? It's important for us to understand because we should have some sense that Krishna wants to have that kind of personal reciprocation with each and every one of his devotees. And the next time that we have a chance to offer something to Krishna, then we can try to offer it with love, because that's what Krishna ultimately wants, is he wants the feeling with the offering, right? If you look at those verses in the Gita that I was quoting, things begin very dry. Krishna says, just offer me anything. It's a very, it's like, okay, whatever I like, I offer it to Krishna. That's where it begins. There's not much feeling there, right? But you see, as the mind becomes more purified and one is able to actually become focused on the goal of life and offer Krishna things, with proper care, then there's more feeling involved. And that's what Krishna is really after. That's what Krishna really wants, is the feeling that accompanies your offering. It's the feeling that accompanies your offering. It's why Krishna went to the house of Vidura instead of eating the feast cooked by Duryodhana, because there was feeling there. His wife peeled open the banana, threw out the banana, and fed him the peel. That's not a very nice offering, but there was feeling there. So this is why these things are nice for us to hear about and meditate on. So I'll stop there. We have 10 minutes for questions, reflections, corrections, comments, anything. If anybody would like to add something. Baladev Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for your class. Wonderful points. Please forgive me for not organizing my thoughts that well. I'm not as gifted as my brother. You made a lot of wonderful points. I'll kind of try to connect the points in the class. You were mentioning the purport where Rupa Goswami says, while Krishna was dancing, his Kastuba jewel fell off and was entered the treasury of Kaliya. And Kaliya thought, and his wives thought, that this treasure was his. And he simply offered what already belonged to Krishna. And when I saw this pastime, it reminded me of a nice Christian story regarding our abilities in anything. Because sometimes we feel like I don't have this ability, I can't offer anything to Krishna, I don't have any abilities. So there's a story where one pastor asked a member of his congregation, a man, he says, "My dear sir, I want you to put a $100 bill in your wife's Bible, and without her knowledge." And so then the next day, on the Sunday sermon, the pastor told his wife of this husband, he says, "My dear ma'am, can you stand up?" And she stood up, and he asked her, "Do you trust me?" And she says, "Yes, you're my pastor. Of course I trust you." And he says, "Okay, so I want you to open your Bible and give me a $100 bill." And she says, "My dear pastor, I trust you, but trust me, there's no $100 bill in my Bible." And he asked her again, "Do you trust me?" And she said, "Yes." And he asked her again. And in frustration, she opened her Bible. Like, of course there's no $100 bill. She opened it. She was completely shocked. And she was like, "How did that get there?" And the pastor said, "I put it there." And the moral of this story is that regarding the Kaliya pastime, God will never ask you for something without first putting it in you. There's so many, I'm the ability of man, the strength of the strong, so many pastimes. And regarding, I'll try to connect this to the main point you made in your class of, it's not that Krishna, when Sudama Brahmana or anyone offers anything, it's not the gift that counts, but the feeling that counts. And we see that one thing that takes away, there's so many pastimes, one thing that takes away our feelings, and maybe you could expand on this, is a point I always make all the time, of Vaishnava Parad, when we think our abilities are more profound than others. But there's that verse, like when Prabhupada came to the West, the Smarta Brahmana says, "Prabhupada, well, first of all, you can't even make it to the West, and even if you do, you're giving to mlechas and yavanas, meat eaters and drunkards. How will they spread Krishna consciousness throughout the entire world?" So Prabhupada essentially told in that verse, "Mukam karoti vachanam." How does it go? "Pangum langayate girim, yat kripa tam aham vande shigurum dina tadanam." There's one last nice passage in a verse from the Bible. Maybe you could expand on some of these points. And in the Bible, there's 1 Corinthians chapter 1. There's a very beautiful verse. And there's so many pastimes you could probably think of that reminds of it. It says, "For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength." Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many of you were influential. Not many of you were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish people of the world to shame the wise. He chose the weak people of the world to shame the strong. He chose the lowly and the despised, just so no one can boast before him. And so my last point I wanted to make, regarding this point that takes away our feelings, when we think our abilities are more profound than others, the Lord could give and the Lord could take away. This is actually a point from yesterday. I kind of, some point I disagree with Josh Prabhu when the pastime of Pundri Vidyanidhi. He could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe one point he made that I kind of disagree with is that Pundri Vidyanidhi, he was criticized by Gadadhar Pandit Prabhu in his mind. And one point that I kind of disagree with that, he was like, this was a minor offense. And then the flip side of the story in the Chaitanya Bhagavat where Devananda Pandit, he threw Srivas Thakur outside the room. So that's considered a major offense. When you see an offense, you consider, oh, that's major. But when you don't see offense in the mind, that's minor. But we could see that, what is a spark? A spark is minor, right? But how long does it take for a spark to turn into a inferno? Seconds. My neighbors, last year, my neighbors had a fire. It's turned into a spark, electrical fire, but it didn't take very long to become practically an inferno. And so there's a verse that says, "Watch your thoughts. They become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, it becomes your habit. Watch your habit, becomes your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. So my question is, what are some steps we do to take seriously our thoughts? Because our thoughts can lead to an inferno of operates and destroy our Christian consciousness. And so maybe you could say, do you take that seriously, or what are some steps we can to take that seriously? There's so many pastimes where the Vaishnavas take their mental condition very seriously.
Mm. You said so many nice things. Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer that we have to have good mental hygiene, and so you have to be very careful of what you put inside your. Just like we take really good care of our health, we eat healthy things, try to eat healthy things, then we have to also have healthy thoughts. I think generally it's when we're too much affected by tamas and rajas, then we have a tendency to always go for the darker thoughts. Like we always tend to think, oh, like so and so doesn't like me, so and so did this to me, so and so said that to me. How could so and so behave like this? But generally, if we have a little bit more sattva in our life, then it's easier to reject the thoughts that we know are coming from a darker place and accept thoughts like, well, let me be grateful. Let me accept what's been given. Let me pray. Let me offer gratitude. Let me try to find the good, even though something may be wrong. Let me try to see the good. So I think it's just a matter of just practice. That's what my observation is. One has to just regularly practice. What am I thinking about? And is this really a good thing to be thinking about? And ask ourselves that question. And if it isn't, then we should change our absorption. For me personally, writing really helps. Like sometimes I can't change the thoughts in my mind, so I write down what I should be thinking. Like I should be thinking like this, and that really helps me. So I think that's a nice point you're bringing out, and I think every individual has that responsibility on the spiritual path, especially when we live in a community or when we're in relationships and families, to protect our minds from sometimes these kind of thoughts. That's a good point. So it's almost 8:30 now. Does anybody have anything last thing they wanted to say or add? Or no? Okay. Thank you so much for your attention. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.